Hi, I'm Mia Friedman, and this is No Filter. I thought everyone knew the real story of Kerri-Anne Kennerley. I thought everyone knew that behind the big smile and sparkle-tastic outfits and the sky-high heels and extroverted personality was a lot of sudden tragedy in the past few years, and a lot of gobsmacking stories about what really goes on behind the scenes in the TV industry. Some of it hilarious, some of it incredibly ugly. Kerri-Anne Kennerley has long been referred to as the Queen of Australian TV, and so she should be. Since she was 13, CAC has been on our screens, interviewing thousands of people, singing, dancing, and making politicians do the Macarena, much to their horror. She's just released a memoir called, fittingly, A Bold Life, and when she came into Mamamia to talk to me about it, for No Filter, we couldn't possibly contain that much Razzle-Dazzle star power into our tiny podcast studio, so we sat her down in front of the whole Mamamia team to talk about love, loss, and finding out you got sacked by reading it in the paper. Here's CAC. Now, it's quite daunting interviewing you.
Oh, yeah, right.
The Queen of Daytime.
Ooh.
And there's pretty much nobody that you haven't interviewed. And I've been on the couch being interviewed by you a few times when you were at Channel 9. And I've spent time in the studio and watched you work. And it's like, I don't know, it's like watching someone at the top of their game. You're like, a really accomplished chef in a kitchen. Like, you know where everything is, you know what you want, and you know how to get the best out of your guests. There's no question in that. See how bad I am at this?
But I mean, that's the point. To be frank, television is just a box with a few people in it, and what they're interested in is what the people you're interviewing have to say. And for me, especially, it wasn't always about just doing an interview. I like to sort of scratch a little bit deeper and get far more interactive and behind the person, which with politicians, that's, sometimes harder because the politicians these days have got all these spin doctors and they're not as flexible as they used to be. But I used to have a lot of fun with the politicians, getting them to do stuff that really, that it wasn't a 30-second grab because we were 5 or 7, sometimes 12 minutes on air. And I wanted to know who they were, not just what their policy was. What did they buy their wife or husband for the anniversary? What was the last movie they actually saw? What their interests are, and how they dance. So it's that's far more interesting to real people than a really boring 30-second grab.
What you did before the word viral even existed is that in getting those moments of humanity, you created viral videos, which is what the Tonight Shows pretty much do now. They're not about who watches at the time in America. They're about creating that moment that everybody's going to share virally. And that's what you did, for example, with Peter Costello, most famously, when he was the very straight, laced-up treasurer, and you got him to do the Macarena. How did that happen?
What I love in one part of the book, because I talk about how we achieved that, and I also print the letter that he sent me saying, yes, the Macarena was fun, but the questions were far harder. Because what people don't remember from that time, we had him on the show, and the issue of the day was political superannuation. So I banged on about this. Eventually, I think he really did get sick of it. So at the end of that, my question was, and I talked to my director and producer. That morning we'd found this fabulous video of 2 dancing Spaniards with the suit and tie, mature gentlemen doing the Macarena, and they looked really cool. So I said, I'm going to ask the Treasurer if he keeps up with international trends. And when I said that, he's gone, yes. And I threw to the clip. So it comes up 100% what we call, all up on the vision. And I said to my director and the audio guy and everybody, okay, as soon as 10 seconds of that, as soon as that finishes, do not stop the music. I said, I want the music full bore. And I stood up and said, may I have this dance? And as my mother said, no man should ever say no to a lady who asks him to dance. And
so you planned it out beforehand.
Oh, yeah.
You knew what you wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
Where did you even come up with that idea?
I just saw the suited Spaniards doing it, and I thought that would be fun to get the treasurer to do it. And there was a lot of strife about that. People at Channel 9 were throwing shoes at television sets saying, what is the doing?
Why?
Because I think he felt awkward and embarrassed. That was the sort of first time anybody got politicians to do something a bit fun.
Before Kevin Rudd had sort of tried to
Cool.
ride the pop culture wave and do all those kinds of things.
Yeah, it was way before that. So I apparently embarrassed him. I was yelled at, screamed at. It was a very ugly time. They took him out to a really expensive dinner to apologise. And some months later I saw him and said, oh, Mr. Costello, I hope you've forgiven me. And his wife, Tanya, was there and she slapped, don't be ridiculous, Peter, the woman made you a star.
It was the most human moment he has ever had before or since.
And he actually said to me, yes, I have, it's okay now, but you've got to remember, I'm a professional politician, I'm a career politician, I've put down 3 budgets I'm so proud of, and now I walk down the street and everybody says, aren't you the guy who does the Macarena with Kerri-Anne?
Look it up on YouTube if you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Morning television is often, or daytime television, or anything that appeals to women, is often derided as being fluffy and silly and unimportant. But you write in the book about the business of morning television, which is something that most people wouldn't understand.
Well, it is a business. It really is commercial television, unashamedly commercial. They're out to make money. So it's your responsibility as somebody who's paid by the network to get as many viewers as you possibly can, who will in turn buy the products and the advertorials, as I did mornings. So you do have to focus on what makes interesting TV, and hopefully they'll sort of hang in with you longer and longer and longer. But it is a business, and you do have to try and do things differently, because the people who appear on your program are going to appear on every other program, because they're normally flogging a book, a movie, a budget, whatever. They will be everywhere. So it's your responsibility to keep your viewer interested, to do something a bit different to what everybody else has done or they've seen from that person before. So what is it's an alternate reality.
Is it very competitive within the network?
Oh, hell yeah. Oh, no, Mia. No, it's not competitive. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?
Nothing. There are a lot of shows on the same network competing for the same guests, right? So how does that work?
It's an absolute bun fight. Absolute bun fight. And the biggies normally win, which I always...
being the Today Show and
Today Show,
Current Affair. I wanted to ask you about the relationship between the star of the show, which was very much you, and an executive producer, which is essentially the boss of the show. So how does that dynamic work?
Always interestingly, because normally you have 2 fairly strong individuals who have a mindset of what they want and need. And it's like every relationship, there's got to be a bit of ebb and flow. And I like to think I let them win occasionally. But it really is a collaborative effort, because what you've got to remember, an EP has got to do the budgets. They've got to look after the staff. They've got to make sure the rundown, there's bums on seats for the next show, because it'll, every day the show's over, you rip up that rundown and you start again. She's got to, or he has got to really make sure all those pieces are fitting together, whereas all I've got to do is sit down and make it work on air. I tried to get involved in a lot of other things, and I had a bit of say, but I did always appreciate that they had a lot more to do, and dealing with executives upstairs is
a
quite
full-time
painful.
job.
Yeah, quite painful. So you've got to appreciate the workload that they had.
Did you have much to do with the executives?
Not really, very little, thankfully. Because all they want to do is interfere. They'll never come near you when everything's going well. You'll only ever hear from them when stuff's happening. You just do the best outside broadcast in the world and had it all paid for. You think you'd get a phone call? Nah. But if something went wrong, man, they're so quick on the phone.
So would Peter Costello be an example of something that went wrong?
Yep. David Leckie took off his shoe and threw it at the television set. I was ordered up there.
That seems quite a sort of dramatic gesture, taking off your shoe.
Yep, but he did. And I was dragged up there and he was saying, "What the do you think you're doing?"
And how did you react in that moment, getting screamed at?
Look, I've stood toe-to-toe with bosses like Kerry Packer, John Singleton, and it's just whatever.
Does it make you... Oh, yeah. In the moment, does it shake you up?
Okay, and you try and get out of there as quickly as possible, but you know it's work because the Canberra Gallery, who are so far up themselves it's not funny.
The Canberra Press Gallery.
Yes, yeah, they loved it. And I think that probably even made it a little bit worse.
Oh, they loved Peter Costello, so it doesn't matter being shouted at.
Yeah, so it was really interesting because we had front page, and when a morning show or a daytime show gets the front page of the Fin Review, the Australian, that always amused me. And every time I made the Fin Review,
well, that's good for business, you would think. It's great for business.
Because it does give you that tad of credibility because they actually do print the whole story. And a particular journalist followed said inquiry into political superannuation, and right, because I was the only one able to achieve getting them to look at themselves. But yeah, like John Howard, they loved it when I did something with a Polly. So John Howard was coming on. The huge story for the whole year was he's about to turn 64. He was going to hand the reins over to Peter Costello, as we know he should have, and there was a deal done. He reneged on the deal, but he was supposed to do this, or that was suggested, and he was turning 64, so that, will you still need me, will you still feed me when I'm 64? So they expected in August, on his 64th birthday, for him to exit stage left. Now, he's coming on the show and I going, yeah, okay, he's never going to tell me if he's not telling anybody else. So in a roundabout way, I knew he'd been to America to visit George Bush and also stay at the ranch. And so I've gone, okay, you and Jeanette, you went to the ranch, like, did you steal the bathrobe and the towels and the coasters and stuff? And he explained fabulous barbecue, and he did a bit of an Aussie barbecue himself. And I said, well, you've been their guests and enjoyed that hospitality from George Bush. He's coming out in October or November for a big football match. I said, so how do you actually respond to that sort of hospitality? And John Howard said, oh, we've got some fabulous ideas for him. We're going to do... And I said, oh, so you'll still be in the lodge in November?
Oh, and I see what you did there.
And he just looked at me as gone, good one. And he never retired. He was never going to retire.
That's
but
so interesting.
Nobody in Canberra ever listened to me.
Do you think people have always underestimated you because of how you look and how you dress? And your fabulous shoes and your just general fabulousness?
Well, yeah, look, if I really wanted to take myself seriously, I sort of, I'd be my natural blonde self. I'd put on a suit every day, and not be so flashy. But I don't care.
But do you think that they think, oh, she can't be very smart?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
They certainly used to.
Not anymore.
I assume not. It never particularly worried me because I actually wanted, since 1981, producers and those people in dark suits upstairs have sent more wardrobe stylists down to my dressing room to tame me down than you can imagine. And I go, and then I go and do exactly what I want. Because I know who I am, I know who I'm working to, and it's not... the Amani Eastern Suburbs lot, or I know who I'm talking to, and I know they like what I do, and also more importantly, I like what I do. So it's not that I ignore. I do take advice, but I only listen to people I respect and I think are coming from a good place.
I hear that again and again from women in the public eye when they're asked about criticism and advice, because Lord knows there's enough of it, no doubt, coming at you. But it's what you listen to, right? Yeah,
well, you have to listen. You have to. Otherwise, you can really not expand who and what you are. But you've got to listen to the right people and know it's right for you. But picking those people, You've got to know what place they're coming from and who they are. They may not have the same sense of dressing style, words, political thoughts, personal thoughts, but you've got to trust them. If it's coming from a place of trust, great, but it doesn't have to be what you think. But yeah, you do have to listen to criticism, accept it, good, bad and evil, but take it and use it to work toward who you are and what's important to you.
Our mutual friend Wendy Squires, who worked for a brief time at Channel 9 as Director of Publicity, after she left, wrote a book called The Boys Club about commercial television. And in the last couple of weeks, we've seen a pretty extraordinary carry-on around Lisa Wilkinson and how she's been treated by the network on her way out. What's been your experience? You've worked in the Boys Club for how many years? Many. Well, let's just say many.
Yes, a lot of years. Oh, look, at the Boys Club, the chauvinism in the 80s and 90s was extraordinary. Ageism, chauvinism, discrimination, sexism.
You weren't paid as much as your co-hosts, for example, were you?
Although I have
Your
a slightly
male
different
co-host.
view on Lisa, but that's another story. But the chauvinism, now there are laws against, and lucky for all of you working here being the age you are, there are laws against so much discrimination, gender discrimination, religious discrimination, and it's wonderful. But in those days, a guy had, lock the door behind you and make a move, you'd just go, draw that line in the sand and say, do that again and I will deck you. That was my traditional response. My zip on my dress at a bar is being lowered. As I turn around and swing at said person, it just happens to be the owner of the network, and I said, do it up or I will deck you. That happened all the time. But I think we had a personnel department, but the personnel department only did the wages. So there was nobody to go to.
And there wasn't a name for it, was there?
No.
It was just creepy behaviour.
Yeah, there was, the old lectures and, you put them in your place. I could, because I was strong enough to do that. But I do know it left a lot of young women, feeling pretty terrible about themselves and not knowing what to do. I sometimes wonder whether it's just gone a little bit too far, because you have to learn to stand up for yourself without running to a court. You really do. You've got to learn, because stuff happens. It's not a matter of if, but it will. And it used to happen a whole lot more. I think there's a lot of very nervous men around the world in all sorts of businesses, not only media, like the Harvey Weinsteins, and it's been going on for donkeys.
And they've been getting away with it for donkeys.
And they've been getting away with it. Things will never change. It's how you handle them. And you've got to be able to handle them with a strength of character. Because the one thing you learn about a bully is you stand up to them and they will back off. But you've got to be serious.
There have been a lot of big stars that have come out of Channel 9, both men and women. The way you were treated at the end was particularly shabby.
What, they forgot to tell me I was fired?
That bit.
I read it. Well, I was driving along Saturday morning, 10 o'clock. Richard Clune, the TV writer, rang me. It was October. And he said, okay, how are you feeling today? Oh, good, Richard, fine. On the way to golf, beautiful day. And he said, well, how are you feeling about, the show? And I've gone, well, mate, whatever goss you got, why don't you call the other people? And because I don't. He said, you haven't been told, have you? And I've gone, told what? That Sonia Kruger's just been signed to take your show. And I've gone, no, I think I missed that. So I picked up the paper the next day, and there it was, front page and page 3. And it took a week for the boss of the station to let me know what was happening.
How is that possible?
Because they have no courtesy and weren't brought up very well.
You're a huge star. The show is raking in a lot of money.
Yeah. I think it was time for a change, and that's, it's their prerogative to do that. But the courtesy of it, to give exit strategies.
It's always their prerogative to pay whoever they want and sign whoever they want. No one's saying that anyone's owed a job in television. But why didn't anyone tell you?
Because when you're hot, and when you're not, you're not. And you hear varying views on why they didn't tell you, because I said to Richard, how do you know this? And he's gone, well, my boss Neil Breen was drinking with your other boss David Ginger last night at the pub, and you were supposed to be told yesterday.
So you had to go to work on Monday?
I went to work for a whole week, and you can imagine all the people I work with, because they're thinking that naturally, what about my job? Because they're now all nervous because they don't know what's happening. But I refused to pick up the phone.
So eventually when they spoke to you, what did they say?
He offered me as a contestant on Celebrity Apprentice.
Ouch.
But, you know, we do really think you're fabulous, Kerri-Anne. Yeah. Look, the boys' club, and they think it's, you see, for them it's all business. They go, well, what's your problem? Like months later, it's like, so what? That's how they think.
Do you think they would have treated a man that way?
Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I think my use-by date was up.
And how did that feel in terms of your identity?
Oh, look, no, I don't. There's no relationship between my personal life and that. It's annoying.
You describe it in the book as annoying. And I thought that was so interesting. Of all the words I would have probably chosen to describe that happening to me, annoying seems not enough. How can you separate those two things?
Oh, because, you know, television is just television, and it's a job for which, you know, I was pretty well paid for most of my life, a job that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I was pretty lucky to be in a business that, 90% of the time, I just loved going to work to do that. So I found it a privilege.
Before we move on from TV, I just wanted to ask about drunk John Stamos.
Yeah, John Stamos, yeah.
John Stamos. Tell me about the drunk guest.
And stoned, yes. Anybody know John Stamos?
Full House.
Full House, yeah. Oh, golly.
He was the hot one from Full House.
He was the hot one, yeah. And he was also going, the reason he was in Australia, he was going, flogging his new role in ER.
Oh.
The show ER. So he comes in from Tokyo. Had done a bit of press the day before, come into the studio, it's like 20 to 9, and Benny, my fab producer, says, can you come down, because John Stamos is really filthy, he's in a shocking mood, somebody wrote something in the paper about him and he's really cranky, can you come and see him? So I trot down and sit him down and say, what is this, John? Come on, you're a bigger international star, you just did the sucky routine. And he got over himself and sat down. And I remember when he sat down next to me, I've gone, ooh, that's bourbon breath.
What time was it?
20 to 9. And I've gone, it must be 5 o'clock in the world somewhere.
Always is.
So he came on the show, and from when we do the live first stand-up, coming up on the show is blah, blah, blah. He literally walks straight in and drapes himself over me.
That's vodka.
Yeah, you didn't know Wawa or ice with that or anything?
I forgot, you're Australian.
And I've gone, we're in for a ride here.
And inside, were you going, oh no, or you were going, this is going to be great?
This is going to be great.
It's what you live for, right?
Yes. So credits come up, we sit in the chair, and he manages to get you could just see this roller coaster he was on, snorting and sniffing and all sorts, all the way through. And if you actually watch it, because I've watched it, I only watched it twice, but he's, all this sort of stuff's going on, I'm going, and he was just a Hollywood star behaving badly. It was fabulous. And so my floor manager's going, and I'm going, no, can't hear you. Managed to take him over a break. And again, those executives upstairs, the programmer, Michael Healy, is getting mad phone calls from the PR company saying, get him off. So he's calling down to the desk saying, tell Kerri-Anne to get him off. I'm going, sorry, I can't hear you.
What's wrong with them? Do they not know that this is television gold and it's one of the most iconic moments and it's going to make international news?
Well, they're just listening to the other executives who are having conniptions knowing it's really a bad look. So
that's so old school, and so heaven forbid there be a human authentic moment.
Oh my God. But one of the funny stories coming out of that was probably 2 years later, a girl called Nina Vlados. Remember My Great Big Fat Wedding? She wrote and starred in it. She's fabulous, really good bird. Well, she was bringing out the sequel to that, and she's here, and she says to me, Kerri-Anne, you're the girl who interviewed John Stamos, right? I've gone, yeah. She said, got to tell you a funny story. At home, LA, we're going to Tom Hanks and his wife's home for dinner. Nice name drop. And she said, they're all, the famous people are there, and John Stamos. So she says, we're having a cocktail before John arrives, and Tom Hanks says, now everyone, not a word, I don't want to hear a word about Australia. Nobody say anything. So she said, we all sit down, and first course is served, and okay, says Tom Hanks. Okay, John, what happened in Australia?
He probably doesn't even remember being here.
Yeah, that was funny. He was just, star behaving badly, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, and again, front page news.
Oh, absolutely. And Entertainment Tonight in America. There's certain little benchmarks you just enjoy.
Up next, I asked Kerri-Anne all about plastic surgery and what it takes to stay looking relevant in the TV industry as you get older. But first, a message from our sponsors.
You write candidly, as you do everything, about cosmetic surgery and having work done. Apparently you didn't just wake up like this.
No, apparently not.
When did it first become clear to you that you wanted to interfere with nature?
Well, when I would wake up every morning with really heavy eyelids, and it being a hereditary family trait, they were just getting droopier and droopier. And I'd look in the mirror and I looked tired without actually being tired. So I said to myself, I don't like this look. So I did a bit of investigation, and so I had that cut out.
How many years ago was it?
That I would have been... at least 10.
Yeah.
Actually, probably even a bit more. I can't remember. And yes, I've had Botox. I don't like the fillers. I tried them once, but they have to stick a needle and then inject it in.
But that's
they
what
got halfway
Botox,
there, and I've gone, stop.
Don't they do that with Botox as well?
No, Botox is just a needle. A little injection. But with fillers, it's like a gel thing. And when they stick it in, they then inject it. That hurts like hell. So that doesn't sort of work for me.
And you've had Fraxel.
Oh, yeah.
What's Fraxel?
Fraxel is a laser. And if anybody sees it at their beauticians, run about a mile, because it is a laser that should be operated by people, doctors especially, who really know what they're doing. If you look back at photographs going back probably 10 years or more, I have the biggest chest full of freckles that you've ever seen in your life. Girl from Queensland, thought it was fabulous to rub coconut oil over myself and get a suntan. So from about 96 on my face, on my chest, I probably had about 10 skin cancers burned off, and they were just the individual little burns. And then the freckles I could never cover with makeup. And people would actually call, that's what a life some people have. They'd call and say, her freckles are terrible, tell her to cover them up.
They would ring
the station and complain about my freckles.
Now we have Twitter for that.
Yeah, oh yes. Luckily I don't.
They would have made a hashtag or even started an account for one of your freckles.
So I had the skin cancers dealt with, but they keep growing through as each year you laid there in the sun. And then I've got the most fabulous dermatologist, Dr. Chris Kearns up in Bondi, and he's pioneered all sorts of surgery for.
Does it hurt?
Oh, heck yeah. Because it basically burns your skin, and the light is attached to a dark pigment. So, and it
I did once hear a rumour that you had to be sedated before you had it done.
There was a lot of vodka that day. They can't put the topical stuff on it because apparently the topical stuff makes the blood vessels expand or something. So therefore you have to have it done cold turkey, and it does hurt like hell. I've also had I had probably 3 treatments to get rid of the freckles on my chest, and I haven't had a single skin cancer come through since then. I've also had it done on my face, and I'll probably do it again next year. That and Botox are my friends.
How often do you have Botox?
Probably every 6 months.
Just here? Where do you have it?
There, and there. And actually there, because,
Here.
again, deep frown line. But less is more, by the way. I can't stand those Hollywood, they walk out with the lips. Who actually ever told them duck lips look good?
And porn star lips. I know.
Yeah,
It's really weird.
shocking.
John, I want to talk about John.
Mm-hmm.
The love of your life. The best relationship that you had after the worst relationship that you had, which was your first marriage was abusive and horrendous, and John helped you see that you had to get out of it, and you guys were friends. And I've met him so many times at so many functions, and he's always just the most delightful English gentleman. The two of you have such a connection. You seem to be one of those couples that just delight in each other's company.
Yeah, we do actually like each other, and I think a good relationship, I was lucky because I knew him for 18 months before I ever dated him. And I think you see someone, through life. He was working very hard in New York and under a lot of pressure. I saw how he dealt with that, how he dealt with other people, and we were just sort of friends. So I genuinely liked him before I fell in love with him. And I think that's a really good basis
Good
for
foundations.
relationships.
He had children already when you met, and then you write in the book really movingly something that many people probably don't know, which is that you guys lost a baby. I lost a baby at the same stage, and found out in the same way, and I really was grateful to you for writing about that, because it's very personal and private, and when it happens to you, feels like you're the only one in the world. And back then, no one wrote about it or spoke about it.
Yeah, it's pretty, it is awful, and there's nothing else you can say about it. It's just horrible. The only time I ever spoke about it before was one feature in, I don't know, it could have been Woman's Weekly, but and the only reason I did that is because a mutual friend of ours who was doing PR came to me and said, somebody's got this story on you, and they're going to do it. So it's either you're a terrible woman because you haven't had children, or this is the issue. And they were literally going to out me. And she said, I recommend that you just do one story, pick your journo, have approval, and which is exactly what I did. And I never spoke about it again until I put it in the book.
I loved what you say about also not being defined by whether or not you have children. And how important that is, because often women, and I've got a lot of friends in this position, you get to a certain age, and if they don't have children, they're viewed with sort of some degree of suspicion.
And obviously a lot of people were doing that to me, but not actually to my face. So I probably got off really easily, because I when it occasionally would come up, I'd just find it irrelevant. And so it never actually bothered me what they thought. But clearly that was a bigger story out there than I knew, because I only listen to the things I want to listen to. I'm quite selective like that.
Those sliding doors moments and the day that you and John went to play golf, and he had his accident, which I really don't want to make you relive, because it must be so traumatizing. How are you finding doing the book tour and having to relive that?
Those sliding doors moments, we were up in Coffs Harbour, Bonneville Golf Course. It was a ladies' tour, and John always came up with me for the weekend. And he was supposed to fly back on the Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, because his nephew had just arrived in Sydney from England for the first time, and we literally on the Friday when we left handed him the keys and say, we'll be back. And John felt quite guilty, so he was flying back early. And I remember waking up that morning convincing him that 19-year-old boy is going to have a great time in Sydney, and he doesn't need his Uncle John. And so he stayed, and 7:20 that night, we were about to go in for dinner, and he literally, when somebody asked for a photograph, went to go out of the photograph, and then she said, no, I want you in as well, John. And he moved to the left, and at the end of the veranda, which was only 850, it's like this, it had a box planter, so that the soil was depleted in it. His foot obviously went on that, and he spearheaded that way. If he'd fallen back or another 6 inches the other way, it could have broken his big finger or his arm, but unfortunately became a quadriplegic with it. And I remember I rushed round to him, and all he could say was, I can't feel anything, I can't feel anything. And straight to Coffs Harbour Hospital, and within half an hour they were having to put him in an induced coma because the swelling basically was, he couldn't breathe. Had we been, 2 hours away from a hospital, he would have died because you just can't breathe. That's why they put them in an induced coma. And I still, hate myself just for making that stupid decision and thinking I should have just let him go back.
Have you and he talked about that
No.
decision?
No.
You say you guys don't talk about your relationship much. You don't sort of, you just sort of get on with things.
Yeah.
It's a very workmanlike approach.
Yeah. I think dredging up every part of your relationship and opening it up and dusting it off and, when there are issues, we have big chats about issues. But I think having to discuss and dissect your relationship isn't very healthy. If you've decided it's not working for you, it's not working. And maybe then it's worth a discussion, but we've never had to dig deep. I know who he is. He's an Englishman of an era. I've not tried to change him because you can't and it's pointless. He's not a great talker like many men, especially of that era, are not huge open up talkers. But when I want him to talk, I say, watch my lips, put everything down, because men can't do two things at once. You have to do one at a time. And we'll make decisions on that basis. But no, not dissecting things.
When he was in hospital, that wasn't an option because he actually couldn't talk for a while and he had to just blink. What was that like? You devised a system,
Agony.
you printed up.
Yeah, I printed up the alphabet because he was, after surgery, he still had the huge thing down his throat for induced coma to make him breathe. So all he could do is blink. And it was like first line, A, B, C, and I'd go vowel, and that's how we'd communicate. It was agonising. But the very first word he ever blinked out was paralysed. That was I still remember that feeling, paralysed, or paraplegic. And I couldn't tell him that he wasn't that lucky.
That he was, in fact, what they call an incomplete,
inverted
quadriplegic.
Paralysed, paraplegic is waist down, and quadriplegic is from neck down. He did C3, C4, which goes from virtually there. So, and the complete and incomplete means a complete was like Christopher Reeve, who had to have assisted breathing. He couldn't breathe alone. So they've got this compressor going the whole time, which means you can't eat either. So you're fed through a tube up your nose and directly into your stomach, as John was at that stage. But an incomplete means the spinal cord isn't severed. So he had 2/3 of his spinal cord, because I saw it on the x-rays, 2/3 damaged. So therefore, nobody knows what's left. So what's left for John, his feet, he can actually kick his legs. He can't walk, but he can actually kick his legs, but he still can't push a button, turn a page, or feed himself. So he has no... he's got enough to push the big mushroom button forward in the power chair, but he can't do anything else.
Was there a single moment when it hit you?
Oh, it was constant. It was just, you're just thinking this nightmare's got to be over soon, but it's never over. It's the difference. I've had cancer. He had he had bowel cancer 20 years ago. I had cancer. I got lucky, got it early, got treatment, get over it. That's easy. This is forever.
And is it a progressive sort of comprehension of what you've lost? Does it come
I'm
in
really,
stages?
really annoyed that this part of our life has been taken away. I'm angry beyond belief about that. Really angry about that. In fact, the last time John and I were sitting on a plane, I've gone, okay, darling, this is what we're doing. We're going to go here and we're going to go there and we're going to do this because all the travel we've ever done, which has been fabulous, but it was all around my work and my timing. It was, it had to be done then. So we didn't get to do a lot of things we wanted to do in the timing that we wanted to do it. And all he said was, well, we get to stay home a little bit. And I really resent losing that because to travel with him now is virtually impossible, especially overseas, because with quadriplegics, their skin it becomes like paper. So therefore, they're very susceptible to what they call pressure sores. He has to change his position every hour for at least 2 minutes to change the blood flow. And those pressure sores they're just horrendous to live with and really dangerous. And, I hate people who've got colds who drop by because what kills quadriplegics is pneumonia and bed sores.
Really?
Because they can't cough.
So winter must be terrifying for
Yeah,
you.
it is. And he did get a cold. And, there's all sorts of health issues that you've got to deal with along the lines. But, his father lived to 100. He's got good genes, and if he hadn't been as strong as he is, he wouldn't have survived.
There were two moments that have really stayed with me. One is you walking in when he was still in the hospital, and there was a doctor talking to him without you knowing, who asked him, basically told him that you were going to have no quality of life or a vastly diminished quality of life, and do you want us to keep you alive or do you want to go?
This was the, they call intensivists, who head up the team of everybody in ICU. When you're in ICU, you're there for a reason, to keep you alive. So it's one nurse per patient. So they take it pretty seriously. And these interns go around looking after people and analysing the conditions every day and every night. And I go and get a cup of coffee, come back and walk in the room. I'm listening to this conversation going, what? And I walk around and it was like, I can't believe he's saying this. Basically, your quality of life, John, will be, vastly diminished, and we can't do anything that you don't approve of. Basically, starve yourself to death if he chose to. And I just shut that conversation down very quickly. That was just awful. And when he left, it was the first time I saw John cry. He was still pretty stoned, and I did ask him months and months later whether he remembers the conversation. He doesn't, but I remember his tears. He knew what the guy was saying at the time.
The part in the book that made me cry was the first thing that John was able to say to you when he could talk, when the tracheotomy tube was removed, or he could mouth words to you. Can you say what that was?
Yeah. I walked in this day and they would get him out of bed to put him in a chair. That's sort of part of the rehab, but probably could only tolerate it for half an hour. And he was sitting in the chair when I got there, and he could only mouth words, and all he said is, "How hard do you want me to try?"
Ooh, that just
it was hard.
And what did you say?
Everything. I want everything. I did promise him once, when you're young and in love, I'd follow you to Antarctica, darling. And I said to him, remember I said that? This is our Antarctica.
What's life like now?
Actually, it's in a really nice swing. It's our new norm. You have to wrap your head around that and get on with it.
You talk about what's required for just his day-to-day care, and most people wouldn't even understand that. Can you touch on some of what's required?
A registered nurse arrives at 8 o'clock every morning. They sort of get him up. We've got an electric hoist to lift him out of the bed, get him into the chair.
He's a big, tall man.
Yeah, he's 6'2", 88 kilos.
Do you still sleep in the same bed?
No, he's got a hospital bed, one of those moving ones.
That must be devastating.
Yeah. It's
that lack of physical...
Yeah, because he can't cuddle, can't hold my hand. There's sort of... I snuggle up to him, every once in a while, but he's in a lot of pain because of what they call neuropathic pain from the chest down. It's at injury level. Neuropathic pain is the worst or the most difficult to treat because it's the brain talking to the spinal cord saying there's something wrong, and it's just constant because the brain doesn't know this is what has happened. You may have heard of phantom limb syndrome, where people have actually had a leg or arm amputated and they're still getting searing pain where they think their hand is. And it's basically the brain talking to the spinal cord saying there's a part missing, and it goes on forever. It can vary from being really excruciatingly, suicidally bad to just being painful. And John says across his chest the whole time it's like having somebody burn you with a cigarette the whole time.
So he's numb to the extent that he can't function or move his body, and yet he's in pain.
Yes, that's the unfair thing. It's shocking. Skin integrity, as I said, is really, really a big problem. And if anybody even handles them roughly, it can just shear their skin, take the skin off, and then they're not allowed to have anything near that for weeks and weeks and weeks. But yeah, so it's, all the boring, tedious 24/7. So nurse gets him up, takes him to the bathroom, and bowel care is very important because he obviously has no control, so that has to be dealt with. Has a shower, they shave him, dress him, and then at night a nurse comes and puts him back to bed and cleans his teeth and all that sort of stuff. And there's medication 4 times a day, so I have to put that on my phone to ring a ding because half the time I'm forgetting. He's got to tilt back every hour to make sure the blood flow is happening in a different area. He goes to Prince of Wales twice a week for physiotherapy, once in the pool. So he can actually, with a bit of water help and somebody's help, sort of shuffle across the pool, but not enough to walk. But the good thing about that is it does give the whole body blood flow. So it does make him a little healthier than people who can't move their legs at all.
How does he get around?
In a power chair.
And how does he get to the hospital and stuff?
Those big wheelchair not even a regular wheelchair taxi, the one with a hydraulic lift. And there's only a handful of those, so you have to book those.
Did you have to renovate your house?
Yeah, had to put a lift in because it was cheaper than putting a bathroom in downstairs.
And in terms of, did you and he ever, probably I know the answer to this because you don't like talking about your relationship with him, but to him, I mean, did you ever sort of go, okay, here are the things I'm up for and here are the things I'm not up for? Like bowel care, no. Brushing teeth, no. This I can do. Did you know what your limits were?
Yeah, I eventually will learn the bowel care routine because it's important in case of emergency. I've chickened out on that up until now, but I will simply because, I should. But no, and they do also talk to you in the hospital about, partners and that sort of stuff. It's, it's just not good to do. But the difference is, and I mean, this is our fabulous medical system, because John is over 65, and that's one big red line, he is automatically in aged care. Whereas, say, Colin, who is 62, is in the next door room to John, he had exactly the same injury as John, became an incomplete quadriplegic by getting an accountant who went surfing at Cronulla every day of his life, got rolled, broke his neck. Simple as that. And we got to know Colin and his wife. Colin's 62. He is entitled to 62 hours a week care, which looks after all his nursing. Whereas John, aged care, the top is 8 hours.
And he can't even be alone for an hour, can he?
No, can't be alone.
So you have to pay for that?
I pay for all of that.
How much does it cost?
About $220,000 a year.
And what do people do if they can't afford that?
They will stick them in a nursing home, they get bed sores and die, and pneumonia and die.
When the power balance changes so suddenly in your relationship as it has with you and John, how have you navigated that in terms of him being so helpless and you having to be in the caretaker role?
The worst thing is having to do the banking. I hadn't been to an ATM in years.
He took care of you, right?
Well, he did. I just made money. It appeared in a bank account and I got it out whenever I wanted. I spent whatever I wanted. It was never an issue. But I had never looked at a piece of... If it had been up to me, we would have had the gas, electricity and phones cut off years ago, because I'm not very good at those sort of details.
Life admin.
Yeah. Yeah. John did everything because I'm also hopeless at it. But I have had to learn online banking. I've had to learn how to pay all the bills. And it's boring beyond belief.
And you've got to make the money.
Oh, yeah.
That's the other thing. You've got to still be out there
absolutely
making the money.
Superannuation only goes so far.
This is not how you thought you'd be spending your retirement, is it?
No, that's why it does annoy me so much. But, what are you going to do? Fret about it for X number of hours a day or a minute. You can make that choice.
What are your plans for the next few years with John?
Just sort of keep him alive, try and get him out and about a little bit more. I would love to take him on one international, on a big plane and get on a boat somewhere. Although he says, what am I going to do? I can't get off the boat. But I just think we need, but it is dangerous. Taking them, the more you handle them, the scarier it gets with their skin and everything, because it is tough. But I that would be a bit of an aim. And there's some wonderful cruises. But getting him from point A to point B, and then there's a lot to think about.
Does he want to go, or does he? Just
I think so. He changes his mind a little bit.
My last question is a kind of personal one, but the physical affection that you and John always had a very physical relationship, and you clearly were so enamoured of each other. That skin hunger of just the cuddles and the holding hands and all of that. Do you get that from your dogs now?
Oh, from my baby.
Yeah.
My little baby who's only 50 kilos.
Where do you get that from?
Well, it is hard. I mean, I can snuggle up to John all I want, but it's not the same. And I got to say, I jump on a lot of planes and I see sort of couples there and or walking down the street holding hands, and I go, that just annoys me. But yeah, it is changing. It's a huge change. But if you can't actually get too depressed about it because you can't change it. I mean,
have you accepted it?
I don't think you actually ever accept it, but you have to deal with it. Otherwise, you make yourself miserable. And there are a lot of people who love to wallow in misery because for some weird reason it makes them feel better. But I'm not that person. It does affect me. It has affected me, but I will only let it affect me less than what I really want. So I won't have it completely take over my life and my mindset.
And that's resilience.
Yeah. And I think you do. You grow resilience.
Like a muscle.
Yeah, I think you've got to practice it. And you practice being positive.
Kac, you're an inspiration. You are a legend.
Thank you very much for listening.
This episode of No Filter was brought to you by Bad Mums 2 in cinemas now. If you would like to read Kerri-Anne's book, A Bold Life, and who wouldn't? It was funny, after we recorded this, as I said in the intro, I just thought everybody knew the story about her husband, John, and his fall, and the fact that she had breast cancer, and what happened to her at Channel 9. I just thought these stories were kind of entrenched in legend. But so many of the women at Mamamia had no idea. They obviously knew who Kerri-Anne Kennerley was, and they were super excited when they found out she was coming in, and they all were absolutely gripped through the whole hour or so that we spoke. When you're doing an interview in front of an audience, you can always tell when you lose the audience, they start just fidgeting. God knows I do it myself. The body language of the audience just shifts, and you know that you're losing their attention and it's time to try to wrap it up. But as Kerri-Anne and I spoke, everyone just was leaning in and was absolutely silent. And particularly, oh my God, those stories that she told her about being in the hospital with John and with the doctor who was basically encouraging him to, or was suggesting to him, I should say, that he might not want to hang around. And that heartbreaking line, how hard do you want me to try? Oh, there was not a dry eye in the house when Kerri-Anne was telling that story. But she's just such a trooper. You probably want to know what she was wearing. And I will tell you that. There's photos on somewhere. There'll be photos somewhere. Go and look in my Instagram feed or in the Mamamia Instagram feed. You'll see photos of Kerri-Anne when she came in. But she was wearing a fabulous Camilla dress with a matching Camilla bomber jacket. And the whole effect, and these very, very high gold high heels. And she had, of course, her hair and makeup completely done. And she just looked everything you would expect. And she's just such a great storyteller, such a great performer. And she was kind of like with the audience, does anyone have any questions? And she spoke, it was really interesting. I would ask her the questions, but then she'd answer them to everyone who was sitting in front of her watching, which was really something that was really interesting, almost in the way that she would talk to camera on her show, and she would sort of talk to the audience and make you feel like it was this really intimate, inclusive experience. So anyway, it's a fantastic book, and it's beautifully written, and I highly, highly recommend it. You can find it at apple.co/Mamamia. We interview a lot of authors on this podcast, as you would know. Last week, I spoke to Marion Keyes. You can find all her books there. And if you didn't catch my interview with Marion Keyes, I really, really want to recommend that you scroll back in your feed and you listen to that one. It's one of my favourite ones that I've ever done. Authors, man. I love talking to people about books because they always come having really gone deep. Anyway. And they're good with words. You can also subscribe to all our shows at apple.co/Mamamia, although the Mamamia podcast app is an even better place to do that, particularly if you're a bit thrown by the new iOS update and you are finding it hard to navigate your way around the podcast app on your iPhone. And also it's a bit crashy at the moment. I'm finding that I'm using the podcast app more because the Mamamia podcast app more because iTunes is crashing a bit. Also, you should definitely go and YouTube Kerri-Anne's interview with John Stamos. It is hilarious. And now that you know what was going on behind the scenes, it'll be even more meaningful. And while you're there, definitely Google Peter Costello Macarena, because that's also funny too. If you want to suggest a guest or just ask me a question, call the pod phone on 02 8999 9386 or flick me an email at podcast@mamamia.com.au. Today's show was produced by Eliza Ratliff for the Mamamia Women's Network. The director of podcasts is Rachel Corbett. I am Mia Friedman. I'll speak to you soon.